Well, good evening. Welcome. I'm Brad Graham, the co-owner of Politics and Prose, along with my wife, Lissa Muscatine, and we're very excited to be hosting Jake Tapper and Alex Thompson, who are here to talk about their new book, Original Sin. First, a word of thanks to the owner of the 930 Club, Seth Hurwitz, and his staff, who've helped to make this event possible. And second, thanks to all of you for being here and for supporting a local independent bookstore. By shopping local, you keep your money in the neighborhood, strengthen the local economy and tax base, experience a more personalized shopping experience, and foster a sense of community. So, just makes good sense. And speaking of local, Jake and Alex are themselves Washington-based journalists. They work for different news organizations. Jake anchors and serves as chief Washington correspondent at CNN. Alex is a national political correspondent at Axios. But they teamed up last fall to research and write Original Sin. It's the story of Joe Biden's cognitive decline while he ran for re-election and the masking of his weakening condition from the public by the White House and Biden campaign. The book's revelations have become the talk of this town and of the entire nation. Some Democrats would prefer to look forward, not back. And the very sad news last Sunday that Biden has an aggressive form of prostate cancer has prompted calls to temper criticism of the former president at this time. But Jake and Alex's book is forcing a public reckoning, raising fundamental questions of responsibility and accountability that extend beyond Biden to many others and demand answers. Who knew what when? Why didn't those who knew say more? Why didn't those who didn't know push harder to find out? Jake and Alex address those questions and more in their book. Now, guiding the discussion this evening will be a veteran observer of Washington, the ever-insightful Maureen Dowd, Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist and feature writer at the New York Times. She also has written 4 books. The most recent, Notorious, came out earlier this year and is a collection of her profile pieces. Plus, Maureen has a history with one of this evening's authors. In the mid-2010s, Alex spent 3 years as Maureen's editorial assistant. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Jake Tapper, Alex Thompson, and Maureen Dowd.
You guys want us to sing, right?
Oh, I guess it's my turn. Sorry. So I'm so glad you guys are finally getting some publicity tonight because I haven't heard a peep about this book so far. No, they've gotten a lot of publicity, and it's a very, very important book. I just wanted to say, first of all, we've all had histories with Joe Biden, and mine has been very vertiginous. And sometimes we've been warm, and sometimes it's been cold. But we were all sad to learn of the former president's cancer diagnosis, and it was another horrible thing happening to a family that has endured too many horrible things. And we all are praying for him. I also wanted to note that Alex worked for me as my researcher, and I'm very proud that he became a fearless reporter. He came to me after competing in Stupid Human Pet Tricks on Jay Leno. And I'm hoping later, once we're drinking, that Alex is going to show us his pet trick. I started covering presidents a long time ago with Jake, and he got in anyone's face to get this story. And he also put up fantastic cartoons he had drawn on the planes of presidents and presidential candidates. He asked Joe Biden to pledge that he would be transparent about his health back in 2020, and Biden did. But it turned out he was anything but. So I want to start tonight with George Clooney, because why shouldn't we? Jake and I both interviewed Clooney, and we both were invited to the opening night of his play in New York about Edward R. Murrow's fight to expose Joe McCarthy. Good night and good luck. And it turned out to have remarkable resonance with things that are happening with the press today, right now at CBS, with Sherry Redstone, and with Washington, which is rife with witch hunts. Murrow said, "We must not confuse dissent with disloyalty. We will not walk in fear one of another. We will not be driven by fear into an age of unreason." But we are in an age of unreason, which is why Jake and Alex's book is so important. Democrats who want to stand up to Donald Trump when he conjures a fake reality, when he goes after people for telling the truth, cannot then create their own fake reality and go after people for telling the truth. And that's what happened in the Biden White House. Joe, Jill, Hunter, Mike Donnellan, Steve Ricchetti, Anita Dunn, Ron Klain, the Palace Guard, as Chuck Schumer called the top aides, created an alternate universe where Joe's faculties were not deteriorating, where he was mentally and physically healthy enough to run for reelection for a term where he would have been 86 at the end. In the book, you reveal that White House residents' aides were told they could leave work early because the proletariat Bidens didn't need to be waited on, but really they were trying to create a zone of privacy. Alex had broken a lot of stories for Politico and mostly Axios about ways they were retrofitting the presidency to help hide this, shortening the stairs on Air Force One, shortening his hours every day, making his cue cards very elementary and specific, giving him special shoes and a walking coach. They even got Steven Spielberg to help coach him on speeches for the 2024 race. So when George Clooney wrote his op-ed about how Biden didn't seem like the same person for the New York Times, the Biden White House, tried to smear him and question his motives. And I feel like he was kind of shaken up by it. And I just wondered what you thought, Jake. I mean, here we have the biggest movie star in the world, and the White House is going after him.
Thank you for the question, Maureen. I just want to take 1 second to thank Brad from Politics and Prose, one of my favorite bookstores, if not the favorite bookstore in the world. I go there every week and spend way too much money. It's an incredible independent bookstore. I want to thank Seth Hurwitz, the owner and proprietor, the musical legend Seth Hurwitz, who offered this amazing place that makes me feel even less worthy than I normally do in my regular work day. And I want to thank Maureen Dowd, whose columns I've admired and whose integrity I've admired for so long. So thank you. It's really easy, not really easy, but it's much easier to be a columnist that one side knows you're always going to land on their side, you're always going to defend them, and that is not Maureen Dowd. And that makes the job tougher, and it makes people like me and Alex love her even more, and all of you, I'm sure, too. I do feel like George Clooney was legitimately shaken by all of it. I think he was shaken by, as we revealed in the book, Joe Biden walking in to that LA fundraiser in June and not seeming to recognize him. And just for the record, it was regular George Clooney. It wasn't George Clooney with the black hair looking like Edward R. Murrow and too gaunt. It wasn't George Clooney with some weird beard for like there are pictures from that night. That's George Clooney, one of the most recognizable faces in the world for at least 20 years. And somebody that Biden had known for at least 15 years, had serious conversations about Sudan. And he, as you may know from the excerpt in The New Yorker, or maybe you've read the book, he didn't seem to recognize George Clooney. That shook him. I think I think it took a lot of guts, but he felt like he really had to write that op-ed. He and Katzenberg went back and forth on whether or not Clooney should include the line that the Joe Biden that we all saw at the debate stage was the same one that George saw backstage. Katzenberg did not want him to include that line. It stayed in. And then there was a lot of stuff that the White House threw at Clooney, off the record, on background, trying to impugn his integrity, there was the laughable line that, George had less vigor than Joe Biden. But beyond that, they were dragging Amal Clooney into it and her important work with the International Criminal Court, and talking about, they were playing like, look, the Bidens are like any other political family. They knife fight and they play to win. And you might buy the avuncular uncle shtick, or Jilly from Philly. You might believe it. That's okay. The three of us are paid to not believe that kind of stuff. But they play to win, and they're tough. And I think he was shaken. I agree.
You say Biden's decisions guaranteed Trump's win, and you quote one Democratic strategist saying that Biden stole the election from his party and the American people.
Well, because Donald Trump was the nominee, and the other party sort of forfeited, because they ran a nominee that even many people in his own White House, and certainly people on Capitol Hill, did not believe he was capable of serving the term he was running for, but justified not saying anything because they thought that maybe he could still get to November 5th and win. And as a result, you basically had Donald Trump, who the American people have known and politically for over 10 years, and as a media figure for many decades longer, versus someone they only knew for 107 days. And it makes drawing conclusions about this election so difficult because the Democratic Party sleptwalked into a situation where they basically had it was a shotgun marriage of a nominee.
Can I just ask one quick question? I asked this on Morning Joe, and I wasn't trying to be snarky. Is there anyone in this room that thinks Joe Biden is... remove the horrible prostate cancer diagnosis for a second, if you can. That's a horrible thing. We all pray for him on that. But removing that from the equation, let's say a week ago, what you thought a week ago. Is there anyone here who a week ago thought that Joe Biden was capable of being president through January 2029? Just raise your hand if you think that. I'm not going to mock you. It's just an opinion. Okay, thanks.
But then why did so many Democrats go along with that? Someone described it as omerta. You were not allowed to say the truth. And when people like Alex wrote stories about that, they accuse you of peddling fake news about how they were hiding Biden. And I loved your line in the book, Trump's limitations didn't mean that Biden deserved less scrutiny. Because I think we've been through that dynamic over and over when Democrats expect us to be on their side and help cover up the flaws of their candidates. And that's not our job.
Well, it wasn't just me. Everyone can go and Google August of 2022, Maureen wrote a column saying, "Don't go, Joe." Because she also saw, and Maureen, and it's not just because I'm her former researcher, Maureen covered, go read What It Takes from the 1988 election. Maureen has covered Joe Biden for the highs and lows through the Anita Hill hearings since back then. And there's like a relationship there, and she was like, don't do it. And then, but to your actual question of why Democrats didn't speak up, Democrats often mock, rightly so, that Republicans say something so different about Trump in private than they do in public. And, they're like, he's crazy, he's a madman, we don't actually agree with anything he's doing. But then in public, they'll go on Fox News and be like, he's bringing peace and prosperity, peace through strength. Tariffs are the best word in the world. And the thing is that Democrats, despite sometimes their, honestly, like self-righteousness, they did not recognize that they were doing the exact same thing with Joe Biden. And basically, anytime they were on TV, there is tape of basically every leader of the Democratic Party saying he is sharp as ever, he is completely engaged and completely in control. They let both their own fear of being punished for speaking out, because as Jake said, the Bidens play to win. Anyone that said anything negative was punished, which is why Dean Phillips is no longer in Congress. And they let their also fear of Trump and their, I think, very sincere, fear of what he would do, basically rationalize, saying that he was fine, because if they spoke out, Biden wasn't getting out of the race anyway, in their own minds, and it was only going to help Trump. So I think it was a combination of those two things.
But the Democrats, why would they ignore the polls, even before the disastrous debate, showing that as many as 77% of Americans and 69% of Democrats thought Biden was too old to run again? I mean, why would they just march toward doom?
The presidency is so powerful right now. And not just the presidency, but individual presidents. I can't recall a time where political parties were weaker and the legislative branch was so self-emasculated or enfeebled. And you're asking for politicians who are at the whim of voters to tell voters things that they don't want to hear, especially in this era where there's so much gerrymandering and there's so much division that most of Congress comes from a safe seat, and they really only have to worry about whether they're going to get primaried from the left or the right. So there's very little incentive structure for courage in politics today. I mean, you can look at the, whatever it is now, $33 trillion deficit as evidence for that. The only way to solve that is to cut spending or to raise taxes, or both. But people don't want that to happen. So we have a $33 trillion national debt. And if you look at Congress and you see a sea of brave people, I would like to talk to you and find out who you're talking about. There are a handful, but still, even after the debate, in that 3 weeks plus before President Biden dropped out, do you know how many Democratic senators called for him to drop out? One. It was one. Close. He had zero, but one. One Democratic senator. There were 51. One of them called for him to drop out. Do you know how many Democratic governors did? One. So this is, I mean, and just so you know, it's Governor Tierney of Massachusetts and Senator Welch of Vermont. So I just think we're asking for a lot. Alex and I and Maureen, we have to worry about readers and viewers, but we don't have to, our careers do not depend on pleasing 51% of a specific district or state. And these people do. And they were fearful. The people who came forward to challenge Biden on this issue, David Axelrod in 2022, Dean Phillips in 2023, Robert Hur in 2024, Wall Street Journal reporters Annie Linsky and Siobhan Hughes in June 2024, and a few others. I'm not talking about Republicans, or conservatives who were obviously saying things, but people that were either journalists or Democrats, they got destroyed. I mean, like they're traumatized. We still talk to them, and they're obviously traumatized. I actually, you may have heard some not great, nice things about me said in the last week or so. And I actually asked Siobhan and Annie, the Wall Street Journal reporters, who Democratic senators and the White House were attacking for their report that was 100% accurate in June 2024. And I just asked them what they thought about what was going on with them versus what Alex and I are experiencing. But let's be honest, no one's touching Alex. And nor do they have a reason to. And I'm not even saying I don't deserve the criticism, but I just was wondering what they think. And it was pointed out that very few people disagree with our premise. Like, we're now at a point where, like, the Democratic Party in America and journalists are basically understanding that, yeah, he obviously deteriorated and he's obviously not capable of doing the job and he obviously shouldn't have run for re-election. That's kind of become conventional wisdom. But when Annie and Siobhan were doing it, that was really brave and really tough, and they were really on the limb. And so, I just think it's like people are scared and the incentive structure is all whacked.
So, Jake, who is madder about at you over this book? The right wing, which feels vindicated, or the left wing, which feels betrayed?
See, the good thing is I unite the country.
He's a uniter, not a divider.
I unite everyone, which is why I'm launching my presidential campaign. I don't know. It's tough to say. I don't know. We did not think. First of all, let me just say, like, if the choice was huge public interest in the book, a lot of people buying it, really good reviews, Times Post, LA Times, Kirkus, etc., or the far left and the far right, and basically every person I've ever disliked in my life are coming out against you, I'm fine with where we landed.
I thought you were very brave to go on Megyn Kelly into the lion's den. And
look, my coverage, I can't point to my coverage of this issue and be considered blameless. I see things that I wish I had been more aggressive on. That Laura Trump interview in October 2020, when she raises issues of cognition, I didn't think she was right at the time, but our reporting has found that he was having some cognitive issues as far back as 2015, although certainly they intensified. But I didn't see them in October 2020. I saw him as an old man who would fumble around, but I didn't see him as having cognition issues the way I saw them in like 2023, 2024. So ultimately, she was right. And so, I don't think, I don't like how as a reporter and as an American, there is so little of people being able to say, yeah, I messed up, I was wrong, I should have done that differently. I'm a grown-ass man. It's okay for you to, so you can say, like, yeah, I messed up, I'm really sorry. I certainly say it enough to my wife. So I don't really have a problem with it. And I thought Megyn would provide a place where I could do it and it wouldn't be considered soft and easy for me to do.
And did you said it in one interview that you called Laura Trump, or?
I did. After we handed in the book, or around that time, February or March, and like we'd really just like reached our conclusions and realized that like the first time somebody close to Biden said that they saw a psychic deterioration was, they said it was like pouring water on sand, was after Beau's tragic death in 2015. Just a horrible, horrible event. And all of this is tragic. And then I thought about what our reporting had shown, and some conservatives were pointing out the Laura Trump interview, and I was pointing to places where I had done this or covered that, and I had, but that Laura Trump interview really bothered me, and watching it is not fun for me because ultimately I could have been kinder, I could have been less dismissive, and ultimately she was right. And it doesn't really matter whether she would ever afford me that same kind of comment or whatever. I'm okay. And so, yeah, I did. I called her, and I have Eric's number, her husband. So I asked Eric, "Can I have your wife's number?" And he gave me her number, and I said, "Can I call you?" And she said yes. And then we had a conversation, and I just said, "You were right." And I can't really say anything until the book tour, but I'm sure it will come up, and I'm going to say it then. And that was that.
I'm curious about Kamala Harris's role in all this. How complicit was she? And also in the book, you talk about how Biden and his advisors doubted Kamala's political abilities. Biden privately called her a work in progress. But I feel like then we have to ask, did Biden unite the party around her so quickly and prevent stronger candidates from running because he knew she couldn't beat Trump and he wanted to say, "I told you so"?
That's such a great question. So I'll take the complicity first. Now, people around Kamala Harris will say, she didn't meet Biden all the time. She was not in every meeting, even though she publicly tried to say she was the last person. So how much did she really see? We don't know. But that being said, after Robert Hur comes out with his report in February of 2024, and as people in the Biden White House at the time have told us, he said the thing. It was the thing that no one wanted to say, even internally, but he said the thing, which is he might not even be capable now, but he's certainly not capable 4 or 5 years from now. And she decided that she was going to put her chips on Biden. She went out there on her own. She made the decision to say that Robert Hur was politically motivated, that it was shoddy prosecutorial work, given that she'd also been a prosecutor, and that Joe Biden was, I'm paraphrasing, was on top of it all. And she didn't have to do that. She decided to do that. She chose to stay completely loyal and attach herself to Biden. In terms of the view of the Biden world toward her, I was very dismissive, both from the president and his entire inner circle, which also sort of begs the question, well, why did you pick her? If you didn't believe in her talents, we call it sort of the Kamala excuse in the book, which is they used her, poor presidential campaign in 2020 and sort of the revolving door of staff and swirl of stories in 2021 as a rationale for them running again, because they said, well, she obviously can't do it. They would frequently say she can't win. And that became, now, there were reasons for that. The ACLU questionnaire with the question about, providing government health care to transgender inmates, including ones that were migrants. Joe Biden did not answer that questionnaire on purpose because he did not want it to become a political liability. Kamala Harris did. There were real political reasons, but it also was a self-fulfilling prophecy about it, in order to say we have to run because obviously I can beat her and she can't. On your last question of
Whether he picked her.
of endorsing her at the end, every other leader of the Democratic Party wanted to have at least somewhat of an open process, something of thing. Joe Biden effectively ended a very bitter Joe Biden, to your point, at the end, where he felt, I think you wrote in your column last week, if you distill someone to their essence, distill a president to their essence, Joe Biden's is a chip on his shoulder. And he was incredibly bitter by the leaders of the Democratic Party, who he felt had always disrespected him, casting him to the side. He had one more card to play. It was he could choose her. And I think he said, you guys want an open primary? Well, I'm going to end that, because he basically gave her his campaign.
So the book doesn't take a position on why he did it.
Yes.
And Alex and I actually kind of disagree on this. And you obviously you make up your own mind, and if you read the book, we don't make a judgment. I think that he was still so mad at Barack Obama not picking him to be vice president, not picking him to be the presidential candidate in 2016, that he had vowed that he would never do that to anybody else. I think that that was one of the reasons he did it. I think he also is very proud of his civil rights record and his support among the African American community, and was, even if he didn't think that she could be president in an effective way or an effective candidate, he was proud that he had picked her. And when she, in the phone call between them that morning before he announces he's stepping down, he sends her he and his team send her the statement, and she says, you don't say anything about me in the statement. And he said, and then they have a discussion, and they decide, okay, we'll endorse you like 15, 20 minutes later, which is good enough for Kamala Harris. I don't necessarily think that it was motivated by this stuff, but we contain multitudes. Who knows? I think it is possible that she had been loyal to him throughout all of this, and he decided to repay the fare. That's the more charitable view. And I'm not, we go back and forth. It's not like I'm the charitable one and he's the uncharitable one. We just have different views of some of these things, and when we disagree, we just kind of balk and let you make it up your mind.
All right, let's talk about Jill. So, Alexandra Pelosi, when Nancy Pelosi very delicately wove a black silk spider web and tried to get Biden out of the race, he dropped her, and their long friendship was over, and Alexandra Pelosi called her Lady McBiden. And
we had that, for Alex got that, we had that in the book, and then she went public with it, and so I think we removed it from the book.
No, but I mean, was she blinded by love for Joe, blinded by ambition? Did she like the Vogue covers and the perks? What was it?
I wouldn't say, I do think she was blinded by love. I would not say she was blinded by ambition. I think she may have been blinded by, to your point, the Vogue covers, the life. It was so striking. One of the things that's interesting about her arc is how different it was from how she was 2 decades ago. I mean, this is a woman, when Joe Biden wanted to run for president in 2004, during a strategy meeting, she wore a bikini, took a Sharpie, wrote no on her stomach, and then walked straight through the strategy meeting. She did not like the political life. She preferred...
That's in her book, by the way. Like that, we didn't make that up. That's in her book, just so you know.
She proudly was very ambivalent about all this stuff, but clearly, for a variety of reasons, some of which I still don't quite understand, but by 2017, 2018, she has changed. She is an enthusiastic political life, an enforcer, really, and sees herself as truly the enforcer, to the point that you have an ambivalent, unenthusiastic political spouse to what people in the White House describe to us as one of the most powerful first ladies in history. Not in a policy sense. It's not like she had, she cared about the intricacies of the IRA or the infrastructure bill, but she cared about personnel. She cared about people being loyal to Joe. And she, through her chief of staff, very much influenced who was in the White House, who had access to the president. And, I think this is in some ways like the dark side of loyalty and love, where it can go in toxic directions. I also think, some person put it to me, she got Jackie O'd. She fell in love with the life. She had as many Vogue covers in 3 years as Michelle Obama had in 8. And so I think it was a combination.
And Jake and I used to track this obsessively, but I think the average book reader might not realize what was happening behind the scenes with the relationship of Val and Jill and Michelle and Jill.
Yeah, 100%. So Val Biden, Joe's sister, had
Pardoned, by the way, she's been pardoned, just so you know.
Pardoned, the pardoned Biden sister, had been his campaign manager for every one of his campaigns until, from 1972, but the first campaign she did not run was 2020. And, there was an inverse of roles of the woman in Joe's life, where Val Biden, and this is also in her book, it's not an anonymous source, she wrote it, she did not want him to run because she thought, especially given the fact that both of Joe's adult children were struggling with drug addiction and that the family was sort of in a fractured mess after the death of Beau Biden, even in 2018, 2019, she thought that the brutal, no-holds-barred politics of this age would destroy the family, and she was not enthusiastic about it. As for it was not Val, but who was the other person?
Oh, Michelle Obama.
Oh, the Michelle Obama relationship. So this is the other dynamic you mentioned before, which is right, that Joe resents Obama for basically preferring Hillary as successor to Joe Biden. But the other element of the Obama-Biden dynamic that I think was happening under the surface and affecting the entire relationship is Michelle Obama, one of her best friends, is Hunter Biden's ex-wife. And the entire time as Hunter went into a drug-fueled spiral, after Beau's death, eventually began a relationship with Beau's widow. They got divorced, and the way that the Bidens, instead of recognizing and acknowledging Hunter's actions, they circled the wagons and excused them. And they basically exiled Hunter's ex-wife in the process. Michelle Obama resented it as part of the reason, and there was political effects. Michelle Obama did not want to campaign for Biden in 2020. Most people didn't notice because of COVID. She also did not want to campaign for Biden in 2024, and actually never did. And maybe that would have changed if he'd stayed in the race, but that was another thing sort of affecting this, politics at the end of the day is still personal, and these personal relationships were affecting these really big political decisions.
Yeah, I would say if you ask me what is the most surprising thing I've learned covering all these White Houses, it's how family dynamics can influence life and death decisions for us. Like the connection between their families and what's going on and what happens to us is much stronger than you would think.
Like the George W. Bush Sr., how the Reagans hated the Bushes.
Yeah, but even why we went to Iraq, why healthcare failed in the Clinton administration, a lot of it has to do with family dynamics. So it's not just gossip, it's determining how our country, what happens to our country. But so we're going to stay on family for a minute because we have to talk about Hunter. Jake, you told Katie Couric about Hunter. I think Hunter was driving the decision-making for the family in a way that exploited his father. You said he is provably, demonstrably unethical, sleazy, and prone to horrible decisions. Just look at the record. After his brother died, he cheated on his wife with his brother's widow and then got her addicted to crack.
Did I say that?
I think that the family was always worried about being too hard on Hunter for fear he might harm himself. And Hunter now seems to be driving the pushback to the book, and he took a shot at you this week. He took a shot at you, Jake, this week. And what's that about, do you think?
I've met Hunter twice in my life. Once was at the very beginning of the Obama era. I don't even remember why I was there, but I knew Beau. Beau was a prince, and that was a horrible loss, not just for his friends and family, and I considered myself a friend of his, but also for the country. He would have been a great governor, senator, president. He was just an upstanding guy. I don't know, I was at some brunch or something before Obama's inauguration, and he was there, and he said hi, and I said hi. That was it. And then the next time I saw Hunter Biden, and the only reason I'm sharing this story is because he has told a false version of this story. But the next time I saw Hunter Biden, I was at the Super Bowl pregame party in 2018. Eagles won. We were, I don't even know how. Oh, Jeff Zucker was my boss at the time for CNN, and so he'd gotten me, because he's the best boss that ever lived, he got me 2 Super Bowl tickets and passes to everything and just whatever. Not my boss anymore. So Jeff got me pregame party tickets, so I met Joel Embiid of the Sixers, and there was Kevin McCarthy, and there was Vice President Biden, and whatever. I was just saying hi to people. I was with my best friend from college, and Hunter came over to me, and he basically accused me of having reported on his divorce and allegations made by Kathleen Buell, his ex-wife, that he used drugs and prostitutes. And he was very mad about it. And I said, I didn't report on that because I tend not to cover the divorces of ex-vice presidents' sons. It's just not really my beat. I'm not sure that is a beat, but or even current vice president's sons. But beyond that, I was just like, yeah, I haven't. That's not true. I didn't do that. And I I emailed my staff. I'm like, did we ever report on that? I mean, I did remember when he got kicked out of the military for drug use. I did report on that, like just a mention in an interview or something. But anyway, that was the end of that. But he has concocted some story in which he's confronting me about something else, something I never did, and it's just very strange. But I think Hunter is part of this tragedy. Hunter Biden was in that horrible car accident in 1972 where his mom and sister were killed and he and his brother were seriously injured. Just an awful, awful event. Hunter Biden, as we all know, suffers from addiction, which is a disease, and people with addiction deserve all of our sympathy. Hunter Biden, I think, also just has a track record of doing things when he's sober that are unethical. I think his lobbying or whatever it was called with Burisma, I think he took advantage of his dad. And I think that his dad loves him so much, understandably so, but beyond just the love that a father has for a son, the love that a father has for the only surviving member of his first family.
But do you think that Hunter saw this as a chance for the first time in his life to be the good son, the good
100%,
son who
yes.
could rescue his father if he could hide?
The alpha, the leader of the family, the patriarch, because his dad.
Yeah, he thought by hiding his father's growing infirmities, he could be the savior.
I think he thought that he could finally protect his dad the way his dad had protected him. I also think, given the fact that there were, he was convicted of a gun charge in June 2024, and there was going to be an even worse case having to do with failure to pay taxes, and that case was going to be much uglier because the prosecution was going to show what Hunter was spending his money on when he was not paying, I think, $2 million in taxes, and that was going to be much uglier. So there also was, I think it's fair to say, some self-interest in him wanting his dad to still be able to protect him as president of the United States. That's what aides told us. He went to war, Hunter and Jill, with Bob Bauer, who was Joe Biden's attorney, and his wife, Anita Dunn, who was one of Joe Biden's top aides in the White House, because he thought the White House should be doing more to protect him. And he thought the Justice Department should be doing more to protect him, and they weren't, obviously. So there's a lot of swirl going on there. It's, again, this story is a tragic one. It's not a comical story. It is a very sad story. And Hunter is a key part of it because, as you know, Maureen, top aides told us that the three worst moments in Joe Biden's life where they saw the most deterioration in him was the death of Beau in May 2015, the Hunter Biden plea deal falling apart in I think June of 2023, and Hunter Biden being convicted of a crime in June 2024. And the reason is not just the drama and the trauma of those convictions and those legal problems. It was because Hunter was openly saying in the family and also in interviews that the Republicans were trying to drive him into relapse, and the Republicans wanted him to commit suicide, and Joe Biden was legitimately distressed at the notion of losing a third child. And I mean, I'm getting shivers just thinking about it because it's such a horrible thing. But that was what top aides say, a precipitating factor in his deterioration during his presidency.
And just one last thing to add is, there was an heir and a spare quality to Beau and Hunter, and once Beau dies, he definitely attempts to try to become, to your point, he tries to become the heir. And I think there was this idea that not only could he do that, but he could redeem himself. That this guy that had become tabloid fodder and a punchline among a lot of people in America, he could also redeem himself through this.
Yeah, this is why I've always covered White Houses as Shakespearean drama and not a horse race.
But this is the most Shakespearean of them all. I mean, like you don't think?
The Bushes are
the father-son? Okay.
very, yeah, I'm telling you, the family dynamics.
The Kennedys too, obviously.
Yeah, the Kennedys. So this is also an audience question, but it's my question too. There's an interesting passage about Michael Bennett where you say he came to believe that Biden's inability to mediate between the people in his administration with different political viewpoints led to lots of incoherence, especially on vulnerable issues like the border. So who was really shaping policy since Biden was not always at the forefront? And, Ron Klain, did he pull the White House more to the left because that's where he was if Biden wasn't paying attention?
Well, I'll take the Klain one first, and I'll let Jake do Michael Bennett. I think early on, a lot of Biden people that had been with him for a long time were very surprised that Biden, the first 2 years, appeared to govern to the left of where he had been much of his career. I mean, this is a guy who, campaigned on a balanced budget constitutional amendment and passed the crime bill, and talked about immigration as a hawk for most of his career. And there is a feeling among former senior White House officials, among cabinet members, that if Biden had been 20 years younger, then less big decisions would have been made by the staff right under him. There was a feeling that Ron Klain was among the most powerful chiefs of staff in the country's history. Republicans would troll him by saying Prime Minister Klain to try to undermine Biden, but people in the White House also called him by Prime Minister. That is how powerful he was. And there was, one cabinet member said, listen, I don't think he has dementia, but he's an old man. He's got 4 to 6 good hours a day. That means that a lot of the churn of governing happens underneath him. And there was this feeling that Klain definitely prioritized the progressive caucus in a way that the Joe Biden of 20 years ago would not have.
So the Bennett story to me is first of all, it's a rebuttal to the Biden camp's response that basically doesn't dispute any fact in our book, but says, he was a great president and you can't point to a cover-up, although we do, and you can't point to any national security decision that was made that was flawed. And the Bennett conclusion, Senator Bennett, Mike Bennett, nice guy, earnest guy, former head of public schools in Denver, senator, he's about to run for governor, Biden supporter, mild-mannered. He goes to this June 2024 immigration event where Biden has a moment of incoherence that neurologists we talked to said was a neurological event of some sort. I can't really explain it. You have to go online and Google Biden immigration event mishap or something, just to see the moment. It's really off-putting. And this is before the debate by a couple weeks. Anyway, he leaves that event. He meets privately with Biden briefly and then goes to the event. He leaves the event thinking, this guy can't manage the portfolio. He is not able to. There are obviously competing groups in the administration. Mayorkas at DHS is much more of a let's secure the border guy, even though he gets impeached for basically being an avatar for Biden. And then you have some very more progressive people who want to have a much more progressive policy where more people can seek asylum and the like. And Biden's not really able to steer this ship at all. Mayorkas is expecting early on in the presidency to be getting more traditional Biden-y kind of instructions as to shutting down the border, securing the border, People forget, but Obama was called deporter-in-chief by the progressives. I mean, like, he had a pretty aggressive border security policy, and I think Mayorkas thought that was coming too, but it never comes. The order never comes. And basically, the progressives run immigration policy until the fall of 2023, when all of a sudden Biden's aides realize, holy crap, we're going to lose the election in part because our border policy. And there's the whole thing with the senator from Oklahoma and all that. But like, all of a sudden, his border policy takes a hard lurch to the right or to the center. And Bennett's conclusion is that's because he can't do this. That's because he's not handling it. Somebody pointed out to us, one of the many cabinet secretaries we spoke with, saying, yeah, Biden makes decisions, but given the fact that the cabinet, especially after October 23, is kept away from the president and told, okay, you present to us, meaning the Politburo, as they're called in the White House, the top aides, Donilon, Ricchetti, et cetera, you present to us and we will present to him. And this cabinet secretary said, well, if they're limiting the decision-making to whatever they present, how much is Biden actually even making the decision? If I tell, if you can pick anything you want for dinner tonight, and I say to Alex, tell Maureen she can have anything she wants for dinner, and he goes to you and says, you can have the fish or you can have the chicken. I mean, yeah, you're making the decision, but you don't really have all the options and knowledge at your feet.
You have a lot of reporting on Dr. Kevin O'Connor and the White House doctor and his ringing endorsements of Biden's health. And while he privately expressed worry that the toll the presidency was taking, but I think, given your book, we have to address, with the cancer diagnosis, do you think that Biden and his team knew about the cancer while he was president? He hadn't had the prostate test from 1971, so most of his vice presidency is presidency, and then he's going to run for the presidency again without ever doing this test?
Lots of people find it bizarre, even though there are some people that say don't take a test after you're 70. Many scientists think it's completely bizarre for someone that's vice president and president to have not taken this test for well over a decade.
Just for people who don't know, a PSA test is just a blood test. It's not like an intrusive. There are worse tests. I can assure you, as a man over 50, there are worse tests.
There were concerns. Kevin O'Connor is an interesting figure in part because he is so close to the president. He's been with him for over 2 decades. He helped with Beau Biden's cancer treatments, which if you were involved in Beau anything, you are sort of like Biden for life, and you are sort of brought into this sort of family orbit. And there was concern that maybe he was not as objective. And I think, based on what members of Biden's own White House have told us afterward, including, Ezekiel Emanuel, who said publicly that this sort of diagnosis means that he probably had cancer for significant amounts of his presidency. Now, whether or not he was aware of it, or whether or not they diagnosed it, or whether or not he was seeing symptoms, we still don't know.
So, Jake, can you paint a picture of the night of the debate from your point of view, being the moderator? That was, to me, one of the most dramatic nights in political history. People at CNN told me Biden got there 28 minutes before the debate, not enough time to do a sound check or makeup, really?
It was wild. So we're in Atlanta. Where CNN obviously has studios, that's where CNN was founded, and I guess the conceit of being in a battleground state was the reason for that. Dana and I are preparing. We've been preparing for a week and a half, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, I don't even know. As soon as I found out I was co-moderator, I was like, oh boy. We'd done the run through, and we were basically done. We had all our questions, and my basic philosophy on debates is go through the questions, do the follow-ups, let them debate, and then just try to get out alive. both campaigns were told to come earlier. The debate was starting at 9. Both campaigns were told to come like early afternoon, late afternoon, somewhere in there. Both of them showed up way later than they were supposed to. But Trump showed up, I don't know, 5 or something, 6, somewhere in there. It's in the book. And, he's a creature of television, Donald Trump. It's not meant as a compliment or a criticism. He is. And he walks around with the president of CNN, Sir Mark Thompson, and, he's going to the stage. No audience, remember, no audience. And it's like, which one's my camera? Okay, whatever. And like, is there a split screen? Just finding out all the details about this. Again, this guy used to, remember, what was Celebrity Apprentice? So I literally forgot the name of the show there. So and then he goes back to his room with his entourage of La Savita and Susie Wiles and all the others. By 8 o'clock, Biden has still not shown up. And he's landed in Georgia. We know that because, Air Force One landings and such get reported. But nobody knows where he is. Somebody at CNN calls Anita Dunn and is like, where is the president? And Anita Dunn says, well, he's done this so many times before, he doesn't feel like he needs to really do a run-through. And the CNN person is like, you really should just send him down just to see it, see the room, see what he needs to look at. Dana and I are supposed to go out and just sit at the desk and just try to get as comfortable as possible for like one of the most uncomfortable experiences one can have. But 8:30, we're still not there. He shows up around 8:30, 8:32 maybe. And he goes through his little thing, doesn't seem particularly worried or engaged about anything. And then Dan and I don't get out on stage until 10 minutes before the debate. I remember thinking, I keep talking about how old I am, and it's probably because Alex is so much younger. I remember thinking it was almost 9 o'clock, and I'm, like I said, 56, so I love sleep. I'm really into sleep. I have all sorts of things to tell me how good my sleep is. I have a ring, I have a mattress, like it's good.
Cool.
And your life is probably more enjoyable, but I'll take my pleasures where I can get them. And so I'm thinking, God, I'm so tired, and I'm not gonna be able to, this is gonna go until 10:30. And then Biden walks out, and I'm like, oh my God, what's it like for him? And like looking back on it, I'm still kind of amazed. Alex broke the story in April 2023 for Axios that they really tried to limit his events, not public events, just events between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. And sometimes 4:30, he'd go back to the White House residence and he'd make phone calls and stuff, but he was there working from home, as it were. And it dawned on me as he shuffled out that why did they agree to do this at 9 p.m.? That's crazy. I'm ready to go to bed. And so anyway, then the debate started, and it was what it was. He sounded awful, but he had a cold, and he was coughing, but that happens. And then came that first awful answer where somebody played it for me today. I was doing a radio interview and somebody played it for me. It's so painful to listen to, and I've heard it now 100 times. It's still just so, it is an old adult man who is just forgetting what he's saying, which would be one thing if you were just like sitting at a bus terminal talking to some guy. But this is the President of the United States, and his one task is to show that he has the energy and vigor to be president of the most powerful, significant country in the history of mankind. And he loses his train of thought. He can't come up with the words. And then that's when he says, we finally beat Medicare. And we had iPads, because if you're moderating a debate, you can't talk to the control room. They're certainly telling you stuff, but you can't say anything to them. And so It's funny because they have this technology, but they only let us have it for like debates. I'm like, I would like to have this every day. Why can't I have this every day? No, sorry. But in any case, I wrote, "Holy smokes," in all caps. And I kept it clean because I didn't know who was back there. For all I knew, my mom was. And I didn't want to offend anybody, but I was thinking, holy fuck. Like, what are we witnessing? And Dana writes a note to me on paper that says he just lost the election. And, it got worse from there. And when we were writing the book, I listened to the debate again and watched it again on TV. It's horrible to watch. And it was worse in person. And I can't really tangibly explain why, other than like, it was right there. And it was a guy who just couldn't speak. He couldn't articulate himself. And we'd all seen and heard bits and pieces. This is something that people have been saying since the book, well, not since the book came out, since like there was a whiff of the book like 2 weeks ago. People started, we've covered this, we knew he was old, blah, blah, blah. I was stunned, and I covered this guy for a living. Alex, who had covered this specific issue aggressively, was stunned. I think very few people who are not part of the Biden White House inner circle campaign really knew how bad it was. That it wasn't just an occasional gaffe. He really was addled. He really was non-functioning. Not all the time, obviously, but enough for that job. If this had been a Senate seat, it would have been shocking, but I mean, what are the stakes? We got 100 of them. But this was it was awful. And so afterward, we went back to the room where CNN people were, having food and drink after all the hard work they'd done to bring this public execution to the American people. And I actually was very curious as to know like what MSNBC was saying, because obviously they're progressive. I do not begrudge their business decision. They're a progressive network. They have a team. It's fine. It's great. Some of the people there, I think, do amazing work. I'm a huge fan of a bunch of them. But I wanted to know what they were saying. And they were saying, oh my God, that was awful. I can't even believe that happened. I mean, it was just like, there wasn't even an attempt to spin it, really.
It was a gut check for yourself.
Well, I just was like, did I just go through? Did I see that? Because also, like, we'd been gaslit for at least the previous year or two. We'd been gaslit. He's fine. He runs circles around me. That must not be a very big circle. Anyway, it was pretty horrifying, honestly.
I think especially for those of us who had urged Biden to just have one term, it was heartbreaking, because if he had had one term, his legacy would have been, I think, pretty good as a bridge. But, as someone clinging to power and preventing the Democrats from, the stars he was kind of suffocating the Democratic stars. It wasn't going to be good. But we've run out of time. I know it seems like 5 minutes because this is one of the most fascinating stories in American history. But do you guys have time just to answer a couple quick audience
Absolutely.
questions? Okay, so based on what you know, was the 25th Amendment in play? If not, should it have been?
It was certainly never in actual play. But the fact that members of the cabinet who, we basically entered interviews granting them anonymity. And then under anonymity, they said, yeah, we would have been worried if there had been about his ability to respond to a 2 a.m. crisis. I think it's maybe not brave to do that anonymously, but we'll obviously keep that commitment. But the fact that they felt that and didn't do or say anything maybe means that maybe it should have been.
Yeah, remember that came up with Reagan on Iran-Contra, or it came somehow up. But Jake, this is for you. During the 2024 presidential primary election season, several Republican candidates for president were afforded CNN town halls to give platform to introduce themselves to the country. Why was Congressman Dean Phillips not given a town hall by CNN when Republican candidates such as Nikki Haley and Vivek Ramaswamy got town halls for Republican primaries?
It's a great question. I don't make the decisions about who gets a town hall and who doesn't. I would give you their names, but I don't want you to harass them. But I mean, there is a formula for how it's done and why it's done. I would have gladly done a town hall with Congressman Dean Phillips. And in retrospect, I think it's fair to say that almost no one in the press corps gave him the attention that we should have in retrospect. I mean, one of the things about writing a book like this is that you realize how bad things were behind the scenes and you didn't know it. And you talk to people after the stakes are over so that they can not only be, so many people, almost all the interviews we did for the book, and I say almost because there's like one guy in the book that Alex interviewed who said in 2024, well, you don't just elect a president, you elect a team around him. But other than that one guy, whoever it is, or gal, all the interviews were after the election where the sword of Damocles, the threat of Trump had fallen, and people felt like, okay, well, now I can talk without running the risk of hurting Biden's chances or Kamala's chances to defeat Trump. It's over, it's done. And one of the many things that I would do differently had I known than what I know now is I probably would have interviewed Dean Phillips more. I did interview him a few times, and he and I have a good relationship, and I like him, and there's a whole chapter in the book called Dean Phillips, and about his story and why he ran and all the rest. I will say that the prejudice, this is such a Washington thing, so I hope the people in this room appreciate it. The prejudice I had against covering Dean Phillips was more about the fact that he was a member of the House than anything else, because members of the House never win the presidency. It has never happened. I think Polk was a former speaker, but even he was not currently in the House. So that is a prejudice that I need to excise, obviously. But his message was, I need to get Biden on stage to show the country what's going on. But I have to say also, he wasn't even that candid about it at the time, because he was trying to praise Biden, but do so in a way like we need to go to a new generation. He wasn't saying the guy's addled. I need to show everybody this. He was going as far as he could without seeming horrible.
Yeah.
So anyway.
He's related to Dear Abby, right?
He is Dear Abby's grandson, but not as many people took his advice.
So once Biden became the nominee, was it already too late for the Democrats to win the presidency? What was the ideal exit point for Biden to give the Democrats a chance in the race?
I mean, the ideal time was after the midterms, and I think you're right. I mean, they implicitly promised that he was going to be a bridge. I think we frame this book as a tragedy in that, I think his defining virtue is that he never gives up, and that eventually became sort of this tragic flaw. But to your point, after he became the nominee, I mean, it becomes so much more difficult. Yet, if they had had more time, let's say he becomes the nominee and he drops out in May or April, there would have been time probably for a mini primary. It would have been chaotic and crazy. Does that leave the party in a better place after the convention? I mean, maybe not. At least at that time, though, you would have a chance to stress test the candidates in an unideal format. But the way it happened was that you basically had a candidate just, inherit an existing campaign, but that someone that had not been stress tested lately, and that was also part of her own team's decision. Kamala Harris did not was very risk-averse vice president. Did not get out there and do reps with like tough interviews and risky projects. So she was a little bit untested herself. I think she actually exceeded a lot of the expectations of people within the administration and within the Biden orbit. But, you know, I think if you had had a mini primary, you would have had, you know, her stress tested even if she won the nomination.
She had a great run from her announcement and the Biden endorsement through the debate that she won against Donald Trump. That was one of the best stretches I've ever seen of a presidential candidate. Now, after that, not so hot, but fine. Not horrible, some bad moments, but nothing disqualifying. But that run was really good. I've been thinking a lot about this question, about when could this have changed? And do you guys remember those choose your own adventure books, like when you're in 7th grade and you just keep making decisions, and if you go into the cave, turn to page 72. This is back when kids read, Alex. So
I was a fan of the Goosebumps ones. If anyone ever here read those?
Wrong crowd. Well, you did this kid right here. Okay.
Yeah, see?
So, okay. Anyway, the Goosebumps are not relevant to this conversation.
Says you.
So I think the last possible choose your own adventure where Joe Biden steps down as a candidate that the party can actually do something is after the Her report drops in February, early February. And the White House freaks out. But here you have the account of a investigator, a prosecutor, saying basically, and he said it politely, but it was basically like, and I don't know how many of you heard the Her tapes, but if you listen to him, he said it politely. 5 hours of sitting with Joe Biden in the middle of the day. This man is too old to do this job. He is addled. He has lost more than a step. And if you listen to the Her tapes, you hear the Joe Biden that we saw at the debate. Not quite that bad, but not good. But there are all these moments on the Choose Your Own Adventure after the midterms, after Beau has his horrible plea deal fall apart situation, and he starts, and Biden has that psychic loss. And there are all these moments here and there, here and there, here and there. But the last possible one where I think, because the primaries were still going, and there could have been some, I mean, primaries are not required by law. The Democratic Party of New Hampshire could have thrown a new primary. It didn't, you know, like if Biden dropped out, they could have said, okay, we're gonna have another one in May. Like it's not like a US election. It's a party activity. They make it up as they go along. So I think that was the last chance that there could have been okay, I've been found out, like I get it, I need to step down. And I think his legacy at that point still could have been secure enough. It could have been like he did something really magnanimous on his own. And like Whitmer, Shapiro, Warnock, Harris, Buttigieg, whatever, Newsom, like there would have been an outpouring and there would have been a very vigorous primary. It would have been truncated. But don't think for 1 second that there weren't a bunch of governors just like this the whole time. You know, they were. You can't get them to confirm it on the record, but they were. And so I think that was the last possible moment where a primary like that could have happened.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, those governors were like quietly donating to various like local mayoral candidates in South Carolina throughout 2023. They were ready to go.
No, they were doing that because they were good people, Alex. I keep telling you, he's so cynical, these kids today.
But they were also at kind of their peak moment in their careers. And the Democrats had this amazing bench and we never got to see them, or, you know, they didn't even have a chance. I saw Josh Shapiro and Bill Maher afterwards and I thought, wow, he's great. I would like to get to know him on the campaign trail.
You should have gone to Akiba Hebrew Academy in the 80s. Josh was 4 years behind me.
Oh, so you do
Joshy.
know him.
Oh, yeah, he and my brother were on the same basketball team. He has always been exactly like that. He's always been exactly like that. Although the only election he ever lost was for president of the student body of the Keep Hebrew Academy.
Oh, wow. Jake
And
has,
I'm not saying that because I won it 4 years before that I could beat him in an election. I'm not saying that, for the record.
Jake has all the dirt on Josh Shapiro. All
But-
right,
but
so
really quick,
Once ate
but
pork.
But to your point, you had this entire generation of politicians that were ready to go, and now, I mean, if you look at all of them when they're asked about this question of, well, why did you publicly vouch for that Biden was on top of it and as sharp as ever, and you can see them crawling inside themselves. And like Gretchen Whitmer, who, again, to your point, is like this great political talent, she was asked about it, and she was like, well, I was in Michigan, and I was on a big bus tour for a long time, and I didn't really spend that much time with him, and I never saw it, and I don't know.
yeah, and as you pointed out on your show this week, Jake, you were talking about Dan Pfeiffer's Substack, you know, because of what Biden and his enablers did, the Democrats have just been bleeding voters across the board in all demographics. And
It's tough to poll for why do you not like the Democrats. Two Democrats who like are so demoralized, didn't turn out to vote, et cetera. And obviously there are a multitude of reasons why people vote certain ways. Like there are very few people who are truly single issue voters. But I just have to believe that, as David Plouffe said to us, we, meaning the Democratic Party, can never again tell voters that they are not seeing what they are witnessing with their own eyes. And I think that that is part of the reason why the Democratic Party is in a bad place right now in terms of, like, Donald Trump's approval rating will tick down, and you look at the Democrats' approval rating, and it will also tick down. And it's just like, they're supposed to go up. Well, I think, and this is just my opinion, I think that the Democratic Party has to reckon with this in the same way that the Republicans had to reckon with the war in Iraq. I'm not comparing the two. Obviously, one was much more of a catastrophe in terms of loss of life and the like, but it is a falsehood that was propagated by a White House that intimidated and bullied people. Reporters were acquiescent. Congress was nowhere to be found. And at the end of the day, it was built on a lie.
yeah, I agree. All right, finally, what was your biggest challenge in writing a book with another person? Alex?
Listen, Word versus Google Docs. I could not believe that this guy wanted to write the entire book in one Word document that we saved and emailed back and forth.
No, I am with Jake on this. I'm
Well, let me say,
exactly the same
I
way.
started it his way. I started it with the kid. But let me tell you something. Google Docs, you can only do 100 documents on one page. And we interviewed more than 200 people. So all of a sudden we have 2 pages of Google Docs. I don't know which one has what. And I'm like, that's enough. We're writing with the one document. And it worked well. I will tell you something. Working with him was an impulse by me. Like, I knew him, I admired him, I had him on my show, I urged CNN to make him a commentator. I actually urged CNN to make him a reporter, but they made him a commentator. I don't think he didn't want to leave Axios, as I recall. Anyway, I think the world of him. I like him. But like, I think Alex put it this way, that we were friends, but not let's write a book together friends. Yeah. That's his, but it's true. It was an impulse question the day before the election. I think she's going to lose. Democrats think that this is Biden's fault. Do you want to work on this with me if that happens? He said yes. The day after the election, we start working on the proposal. And it is truly one of the most satisfying professional relationships of my life. First of all, metabolistically, we're the same. Like, we're just nuts, like in terms of constantly writing, reporting, whatever, writing, reporting. Second of all, like, I think we're both pretty good at, like, not being married to any of our reporting. So if the other person's like, a little too much on Build Back Better, okay. It was just great, honestly.
Did you have to put all that together in 2 or 3 months?
Yeah, I mean, November 6th, we had no book deal, no interviews done, except for that one guy, and no words written. and we interviewed 200 people, and we turned the first draft in on January 31st. My mom still blames you for me missing Christmas, and
Not my holiday.
And then I think we went through the editing process. I think it was in the bank by like March 10th, and now it's here. To Jake's point, it was like one of the most rewarding professional experiences of my entire career. It was also one of the craziest, but also it was like I don't know, it was almost more fun to just like be in it it's not necessarily fun just thinking about Joe Biden and all of his inner circle every single hour. I had the amount of stress streams I had during this period. Yeah. You're having like Jill and Anthony Bernal and Steve Ricchetti, who no one knows, in your dreams. It was sort of stressful, but it was great.
Just the only thing I'd add to that is, because I know I'm sure there are aspiring writers in here and people who ask, like, how did we do this in this time? Obviously, we didn't do all 200 interviews and then sit down and write the book. You couldn't do that. But what we did was, George R.R. Martin, who writes the Game of Thrones books, says there are two kinds of writers. There are gardeners who kind of just like see what happens and develops and what grows, and there are architects who just like do the structure and then go in and fill in room by room. And we did this. This is my 8th book, and Alex's first. And I said, we just need to do the structure first and then go in and like each room and just fill in each room. And so the structure of the book as it began was pretty much close to the structure as it ended. It was pretty clear, like, we're only going to do one chapter on the Harris campaign at the very end, because that's not really what the book's about. We'll do a chapter explaining the Biden mythology and like all the horrible things he's been through early on, because we want people to understand why he thought he could do this. And also, like, this is a tough book, but we are not unsympathetic to Joe Biden or his family. We're not. But unfortunately, their family struggles affected all of us. And so it was something that I thought that, was important. But structure, in my view, is whatever you think. Maybe you don't think I'm a good writer or whatever, but like, I think structure is so important when it comes to writing a book. So I would just urge any of you who want to be writers, who want to write a book, to think about structure. Don't just see unless you're George R.R. Martin, don't just go see what the characters do. Figure out the plot and then write the chapters.
One last thing. The one writing tip that Jake is not sharing is that, at the time, his show was from 4 to 6, and he kept asking me for the Word doc at 3:45, and I'm like, well, you're going to be on air, so I want to work on it. And this guy, during his commercial breaks, was writing, like, I'd get the document back at
very long commercial breaks. You know that. They're like 4 minutes. If they're going to do that to me.
All of these Cialis commercials, Jake...
That's a lot of information people need to absorb.
Jake here is like sending me the document back at 6:15 with 2,000 new words. And
just Cialis.
So again, I think the other writing tip that he's not sharing is always write during commercial breaks.
That is hilarious. But the true test of how close you got is, Jake, did you ever see Alex's Jay Leno's Stupid Human Pet?
I didn't even know about it until this moment.
All
He
right.
has met every single member of my family. Like, he and my daughter's boyfriend have bonded about Harvard. He's headed to Harvard in the fall. But no, he's, you know him. He keeps his cards close to his
So
vest.
he's still closer to me. Thank you, guys. You're an amazing audience, and the book is great.
Thank you to Maureen Dowd.
Thank you.
What a dream to have her do this. I mean,